Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations held its annual General Assembly at the Gallagher Centre in Yorkton, Saskatchewan this week. Indigenous veterans, advancing Indigenous issues and finances were discussed, but the controversial forensic audit was off limits. Here's APTN's Rachel May with an update.
When chiefs arrived at the Assembly, the forensic audit by Indigenous Services Canada and KPMG, which found $34 million in ineligible, questionable, and unsupported spending, was not on the agenda. Sources at the Assembly tell APTN that Shoal Lake Chief Marcel Head moved to add the topic, but after a 30-minute discussion and vote, the motion was defeated. The source also said that just under 40 chiefs and proxies were at the meeting on day one, but a few more filtered in over the course of the day. Chief Bobby Cameron had several motions which were approved, including inviting King Charles to the 150th anniversary of Treaty 6 and to do a study on the impact First Nations have on the economy. First Vice Chief David Pratt also had a motion passed to allocate $1 million a year from the First Nations Trust Fund to support the First Nations Health Ombudsperson Office. The Assembly also honored veteran and former Chief James MacArthur of Pheasant Rump Nakota Nation, who served tours in Vietnam and Korea. Rachel May, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Moving to the Northwest Territories now, where the Office of the Auditor General recently released an audit focused on equitable housing in the territory. Video journalist Bruce De La Cruz has more.
The audit found that Housing NWT, the governing body for housing in the Northwest Territories, had been unsuccessful in fixing the housing crisis currently facing the territory. Key findings in the audit included: Housing Northwest Territories did not know whether it provided equitable access to suitable public housing, did not effectively manage the condition of its public housing inventory, and did not take measures to ensure the funding under its home ownership program was being equitably allocated. Paul Annie Pierre is the Senior Assistant to Auditor General Karen Hogan. Pierre said they were dismayed at the audit's findings.
We are disappointed at the lack of progress on some of these issues. While the auditor can raise the issues, the accountability lies with the corporation and with the Assembly, who can ask for action and monitor progress.
NWT Housing Minister Lucy Captana held a press conference shortly after the audit was tabled to discuss next steps for Housing NWT.
The report shows we need to do better to make housing and housing support fair and accessible for those who need it most. This is not just another report, this is a call to action.
Some of the promises Housing NWT made in response to the audit include monitoring public housing allocation, monitoring unit conditions and maintenance, and outcome monitoring for home ownership programs. Captana commented on the importance for small communities in the Northwest Territories to have housing support during the ongoing housing crisis.
Having housing at the community level, a strong housing organization, and infrastructure at the community level lends to everything across the board that GWT does, from health to education to infrastructure to social supports. Because, like I've told everybody, if you don't have a home, then how can you function? And this goes to every community.
Bruce De La Cruz, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Earlier this week, the city of Richmond near Vancouver held an information session for homeowners affected by the recent court decision, giving the Cowichan tribe on Vancouver Island title to land currently being occupied by private landowners. APTN's Tina House was there and has more.
It was standing room only, as a few hundred people showed up at the information session held by Richmond City Council. However, that information session turned heated.
Why did you guys not reach out to us? I'm asking you. You're the mayor. You're supposed to know everything that's going on in Richmond. I pay my taxes to you. Why did you not reach out to us?
Do the lawyers want to address that one?
Yes.
No, cool it, guys.
Tony Capuccinello-Arici is the lawyer for the city of Richmond. He stated that it was up to the plaintiff to have notified the homeowners, but the crowd strongly disagreed. In August, the BC Supreme Court ruled that the Cowichan tribes have Aboriginal title over a portion of the land on the Fraser River, shown here within the black highlighted area on the map. The case centered around Aboriginal title to approximately 1,846 acres of their traditional summer village, Tuluktunis, and surrounding lands on the south shore of Lulu Island, which is now part of the city of Richmond. Throughout the 5-year-long battle, the city of Richmond, the Musqueam Indian Band, Tawasin First Nation, and the province of BC argued in court, but lost. The landowners here are worried and have raised serious concerns over what will happen to their property value and how exactly the case of the rights and title being given to the Cowichan First Nation will affect them.
Will each individual owner have to challenge their assessment on a year-to-year basis while this goes on and our property values are decreased?
All those negative things, home equity, all that is plummeted. There's a cloud. If your property is within the area outlined in black, there certainly is a real concern. And the only solution, unfortunately, is to have this matter overturned on appeal.
Last week, the Cowichan First Nation issued a letter stating they are not challenging the effectiveness or validity of the title held by individual private landowners. The ruling does not erase private property. Mayor Brody was asked about that letter.
The Cowichan issued a letter yesterday saying that really this meeting is overreaction and that basically that the landowners don't have to worry about anything. We very strongly disagree with that, with the sentiments in that letter.
The City of Richmond, Province of BC, the Musqueam Indian Band, and Tawasin First Nation are all appealing the decision. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
It's Thursday, and that means our Truth in Politics panel is here. Jennifer and Negon will join us after the break. Stick around. Welcome back. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew says a member of the opposition party mocked his speech on protecting the rights of vulnerable groups and made a crying sound and gesture as Kinew was about to speak about First Nations people, including his father, not being able to vote in Canada. However, the Conservative MLA in question, Jeff Wharton, disagreed with that assertion. That is one of the topics on this week's Truth in Politics panel. With us as always, Jennifer Leywitz, the CEO of Pusquash Strategies, and Negon Sinclair, a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Negon, great to see you as always. Negon, we'll start with you as you've already written what is believed to have happened in the Manitoba legislature. Premier Wab Kinew is saying the wah-wah sound came as he was talking about the fact that his father was not allowed to vote in this country. Conservative MLA Jeff Wharton says his noise was not aimed at Kinew's father, but rather at Kinew's comments that the Tories are entitled, while the NDP are hardworking. What's your take?
No, it's absolutely in reaction to Wab Kinew talking about his father. Now, I deserve a gold star for having watched about 4 hours of Manitoba legislative debate to get to that particular clip. So I watched it numerous times. People can go to my newsletter and get the exact moment on the Manitoba legislature website. It is unarguable that it has a lot to do with that. But it was also in the context of a very rancorous debate involving a bill in Manitoba, which is to basically ask the government to turn to a judge when they want to evoke the notwithstanding clause. And so the notwithstanding clause, of course, has been used several times now, well documented by the Canadian human rights organizations and so on, to target Indigenous peoples, target racialized peoples, LGBTQ2+ peoples, to limit rights. And I think this is a real interesting moment in which you're seeing a long history of Canada limiting rights on Indigenous peoples. And when we talk about that history, it's not taken very seriously by some members of our communities. And for one of the two ruling parties in Manitoba to make fun of the history of Indigenous peoples not having the vote, not take it seriously, and then use it in the context of debate, parliamentary debate, where we're supposed to be talking about what the future of our community looks like, and to bring that rancorous division, that long history of racism, and make light of it, it is not a good look for a party that wants to choose a different direction when it comes to treating Indigenous peoples, which the Conservatives have now apologized many times, in which doing for the election campaign, and also their most recent steps that they take to try to build a relationship with a voter base that has in many ways rejected them.
Jennifer, your read on what happened in the Manitoba legislature?
Well, I didn't see the video. I don't have as much patience to sit through that many hours of legislative proceedings in another province. I'm really not surprised. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that, maybe everything isn't what it seems, but the Manitoba Conservative Party has, historically had some pretty major issues over the last several years. And every political body has had some type of problem since the beginning of time. But this is a party that, did campaign on searching the landfills, and they've been, quite problematic. And I truly think that Wab, being an Indigenous premier, is going to have to deal with an extra layer of not just hurdles and barriers that, everybody has to deal with when they get into politics, but as an Indigenous premier, it's really disappointing to hear that that would be something that would even be happening, because those are the types of things that when we see Indigenous people get involved in, Eurocentric political spaces, they're already breaking down barriers, but there's that historical connection of, maybe my parent was not legally allowed to vote in this country, or my grandma at some point in this country was not legally allowed to vote. So those were not just entering these spaces, we're bringing with us that historical context of what was not allowed to exist prior. And it's really disappointing to hear that he had to deal with that. Not only do I hope that there's an apology personally to him, but I also hope that there's an apology on the floor of that legislative building to not just the people that were impacted by that comment, but to all Canadians and all Indigenous people that consistently have to advocate to not face racism in our institutions.
Well, I'll note that rather than watching the 3 or 4 hours, you can visit our website, and we have about 10-15 minutes of the debate there. Nigan, also happening today in Ottawa, the Canadian Armed Forces are delivering a formal apology on behalf of the CAF to current and former members and their families who have experienced racial discrimination and racial harassment in connection to their military service. Your thoughts on the importance of this apology?
In 1993, Indigenous veterans got together and had felt disenfranchised by Remembrance Day, arguably one of the most important days of this country, in which we all take a little time out of our day to recognize the contributions of veterans who fought against tyranny, against fascism, who fight in many ways for our freedoms, that we have the opportunity to be able to have a show like this where we can share opinions, we can disagree, and that we don't have to worry about getting harmed as a result. If Indigenous veterans, which have a long history and certainly a great deal of evidence, including my grandfather, of being disenfranchised, they were good enough to experience equality overseas, but when they came back to Canada, did not get the same veterans benefits. We're in a society that in many ways mistreated them because of the injuries that they have sustained during conflict. And for many of our veterans, they lived on the streets. Think of the story of Tommy Prince, or one of his best friends, my grandfather, who they took good care of each other on the streets, but they were both very poor, and they were living in a society that really did not value them. This is an apology long time coming. It's also coming at the heels of what is going to be a national day in which provinces, including Manitoba, has now recognized November 8th as the National Day for Indigenous Veterans. This is a step in a process in which we begin to repair relationships with some of the people that have given the most to this country, which are Indigenous peoples who did not have to participate in world wars, but went anyways, the largest racialized groups, both in both world wars and the Korean conflict. We have a long history of serving this country. The question is, does this country serve us as much as we have come up for that country, for our relatives?
Jen, earlier this year, the Federal Court of Canada approved a $150 million class action claim settlement for Canadian Armed Forces members who assert they've been subjected to racial discrimination or racial harassment. That's dating back to 1985. Is this apology related to that, or is there more to this?
I think the apology has something to do with it. I think that we've been pretty, having a hard time grappling with the history there as a country. And you see it in the attitudes that we see from Canadians, even talking about Indigenous Veterans Day. This is an issue that people take so much offense to that it actually kind of makes me sick. Every Indigenous Veterans Day, I go to the ceremony every year. My great grandpa fought in the war. And what is getting more and more frustrating is that long standing, inequality and mistreatment of not only Indigenous veterans, but Indigenous people in general is now showing up in modern context through, recognized days or whatever it might be. And there are Canadians out there that take offense to that, where, well, why is it separate? Why is it this? It's like, if you're worried about, potential special treatment here, you should look at the fact that when Indigenous veterans were coming home, they were treated like they weren't even human beings, and they were rewarded with a system that wanted to take away their kids, kill their culture, and have long-standing effects on our generations that we're still healing from today. And it wasn't just veterans coming home that might not have got this or that. Some of them were coming home wounded, living with disabilities, CPTSD, PTSD, whatever it might be, that didn't get to access any of those same resources, despite having showed up and fought for the country. That, like Nigon said, they didn't have to do that. And conflicts around the world affect us here at home, and I see that as quite honorable. But I think it's time that we not only acknowledge that, but we pay for the restitution that we owe as a country back to Indigenous veterans and their families.
We're going to leave it there and continue the conversation over on the Truth in Politics podcast. Thanks to you both.
You betcha.
Thanks.
Thursday also means a new episode of Nation to Nation is coming up after the news. We'll bring you a preview of that and this week's APTN Investigates after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And this adorable little dog named Bosco Boy, and he's out enjoying the shoreline at Point Pleasant Park in Halifax. Thanks to Rochelle for sharing the moment. For your chance to be our next photo of the day, you can send your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, showers and 15 in Charlottetown, cloudy and 16 for Halifax. 3 in Kuujjuaq and Nain with flurries expected. 7 in Montreal, cloudy and -2 in Val-d'Or. 6 in Sault Ste. Marie, 2 in North Bay. 7 for Thunder Bay, cloudy and 3 in Kapuskasing. 2 in God's Lake, 1 for Norway House in the Paw. 6 in Winnipeg, Brandon and Dauphin. Cloudy and 4 for Regina, 5 for Saskatoon. 4 in Meadow Lake, 3 for Stony Rapids. In northern Alberta, sun's out and 4 above in Fort Chipewyan. Snow and 6 for Peace River. Cloudy and 5 in Edmonton, 13 for Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. 9 with showers for Vancouver, 8 in Kamloops. 5 for Prince George, sunny, and 4 for Dease Lake. -9 in Old Crow, +2 in Whitehorse. 4 above in Yellowknife, 0 for Norman Wells. -10 in Sax Harbor, 8 below for Inuvik. -5 in Chesterfield, 4 below in Arviette. -12 for Resolute, 15 below in Arctic Bay. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Nation to Nation host Karen Pugliese is standing by. Tell us what's coming up on tonight's episode.
Well, if you or someone you love is a non-status Indian, and you probably have someone in your family who is, then you're going to want to stick around for Nation to Nation. Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Golmassi has a bill going through the Senate that could restore status for about 3,000 to 5,000 people. But then, holy, something I didn't expect to happen happened. The Senate Standing Committee heard from dozens of witnesses, and almost every single one of them asked them to change the bill and make it end the second generation cutoff. So what's the Senate going to do? Senator Paul Prosper joins me and tells me what amendments he wants to make to the bill. You are going to want to stick around for that. It's coming up just in a matter of minutes on Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Karen. APTN Investigates returns this week with an all-new episode. And following a year of tragic loss, video journalist Rob Smith returns to his family's traditional homeland in Kingcome Inlet, BC. Back on the land with the help of his elders, Rob documents an intimate and personal journey, a path towards healing out of the darkness. Here's a preview.
This valley is the homeland of the Jaudano people. The Kingcome River flows through it. It's our highway. We've been here for thousands of years. My name is Rob Smith. I'm a journalist.
It's so important for me personally to be here this year.
2024 was a year to grieve. Our family lost 3 of our own, 2 sisters who I'd grown up with, and a younger brother I never got the chance to know.
It really is the hardest thing to want to even understand when our children go before us. I was born here. I was one of the very few people born in Kingcome. I've recognized its beauty, but I've also recognized the difficulties that we as a people have had and have not always carried out who we are as a people based on the traumas that we face. And that's still happening today.
And you can catch APTN Investigates Out of the Darkness on Saturday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And Rob will join us here tomorrow night to talk about his documentary. We're all out of time for your APTN National News for this Thursday. Of course, for news anytime, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy Miigwech. Thanks for being with us. Stick around, Karen is up next with Nation to Nation. We'll see you back here tomorrow.